All right, we are live. Welcome, everybody, to the Gunner Technology Livestream, a weekly tech talk for non-techies and techies alike. I'm your host, Derry Americans. With me is CEO of Gunner Technology, Cody Swan. What's up, Cody?
Oh, I am just pumped for this new series. I think it's going to make a great 10-part series and a phenomenal spin-off for a book. I'm just jammed for it.
It's going to be super cool. I mean, we're doing something different this 10-part series. We're going to be walking through basically it's a real application, but we're sort of going to walk through it as if it were an application that we were building for an entrepreneur. So it's going to be a bit of role playing. Cody, I guess, playing his usual role of CEO of Gunner Technology, and I'll be sort of the stand-in entrepreneur with a harebrained idea that I imagine to be world-changing, which it is. So before we get to that, though, let's jump in on the Facebook stuff. So we have our Country Shore giveaway, which everyone can sign up for on our Facebook page. Country Shore is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. You can visit them at countryshoreoutfitters.com. The winner this week of the Country Shore giveaway is Mark K from Norfolk, Virginia.
I thought you were
So
going to say it's the Crypt Keeper.
the winner this week is the
Given
Crypt
the theme
Keeper.
of
Do you mean that guy from ESPN? What was his name?
John Clayton,
Don Clayton.
who holds the record or holds the distinction for having the best. This is Sports Center commercial where he's playing
Hey,
heavy
Ma!
metal. Make me some grilled cheese or something like that.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
He's just like eating ramen noodles in his bedroom.
Yeah,
Barry Melrose is the guy who I think called him the Crypt Keeper and got fired, right? The hockey guy.
Well, Barry Melrose gets fired so many times
Hard
and
to
then
keep
comes
track.
back. He's like the Crypt Keeper because you can't kill him. He gets
Yeah.
fired. He's been like he was like the coach. He's been
he's been a hockey coach like 7 times.
Yeah.
He gets fired after one season, then he comes back.
Exactly. It's weird how he has this penchant for revivals.
Yeah, you just can't get rid of him. He's like the creature from It Follows. Like you can run away, but it just comes back in whatever city you end up in next. So Mark, you got a bunch of copies of our ebooks heading your way and a sweet Country Shore hat. Everyone else can hop on countryshoreoutfitters.com and get a hat, and it'll eventually become as grungy as this one is. I gotta get some new Country Shore hats. Although I guess it's a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors, so this is probably apropos that my hat is super gunky.
Black one's holding up pretty well. I've had this one for about a year and a half.
Yeah, that looks pretty good.
Pretty good quality. It's the problem with hats. I'm a big hat snob, and I won't wash a hat because if you wash it, it ruins the fit of it, like the bill.
100%.
So it's just you wear it until someone says, "Man, something smells," and you're like, "Yeah, it's probably my hat." Then you throw it out and get another one.
My mom used to put them in the top rack of the dishwasher.
Yeah,
because she imagined that worked, but no, it did not.
It just ended up smelling like John Clayton's ramen noodles.
Yeah, exactly. I just used it as a bowl from then on out. So while you're on our Facebook page, go ahead and answer our question of the week, which this past week was an awesome question of the week. So I'm curious to hear what the answers that we got were.
Oh yeah, the past week. So it was what one task would you never want to do ever again? And people were following in my footsteps with taking the trash out. I have a new one though this week that I would like to kind of change.
A new answer or a new question?
New answer, and that is replace the diaper of a dog in heat. That's my new answer.
Yeah,
I've been doing that this week, and I just don't ever want to do it ever again.
Yeah, that sounds like, you know what my answer would be is, and I realized that this past week is brush my teeth when I'm tired beyond belief. I think that's the worst activity.
Oh,
even though it's like a minute or two, like, yeah, like oral care when you're ready to pass out standing up.
You know, it's funny you said that because two things. I threw out my back yesterday, so I was so tired, I decided to lean over the sink while I was brushing my teeth, and that's how I threw out my back. Hashtag I'm old.
Yeah, I was going to say elderly problems.
The second one was I always have no sympathy for people who just can't get stuff done. Like you have a task that you hate, and so you just never do it. And you procrastinate, and people are like, "Oh, I just don't want to do this." I'm always like, just suck it up and get it done with. However, I empathize when it comes to flossing when you're tired because, man, after like a night of like drinking or even just a long night of working.
Yeah, a long day of working, and you realize it's like 3 to 4 minutes for the complete routine to be done. And it's as if you were just about to be asked to like cross the desert, the Gobi Desert.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
you just
You know what's
want there
interesting?
must be like a device out there, right? Like a Jetsons device that'll do it for you. How do we not have that yet?
There's gotta be. It's probably not very effective. It probably like puts the toothbrush in your nose or something. But there has to be there has to have been an attempt. An attempt
Turn
was
into a
made.
Charlie Chaplin routine. What are you trying
Yeah.
to do?
But, you know, speaking of the desert, I read that more people die from hypothermia than heat-related deaths in the desert.
Well, now that is a fun fact.
I'm
So
pretty
like at
sure.
night they freeze to death as
Yeah,
opposed to
because
in the day
they prepare for the heat, but they're not ready for the cold.
the
Which
cold will get
sounds
you.
like a rap album.
That's a
I was
sick line.
totally. I was prepared for the heat, but not for the cold.
Yeah, check out Cody's new single. It's about to drop.
I'll be dropping.
The desert.
Okay, so
So
this
what's
week's
the question for next week? What we got coming
oh
up?
yeah. So this week we have in line with our theme. It's what's your app idea?
Oh yeah, I'm genuinely curious to see what we get from that. If we get any good
Everyone's got
ones,
an idea.
like
Everyone's got an idea.
yeah, if we get any good ones, we'll happily reach out and see if we can build it together. But I'm curious what people got. If anyone has an idea for a automated toothbrush flossing mouthwash system that you can just put in your mouth before you go to bed, we'll gladly fund that.
Isn't that why people have children? Like so they can
I
do
think
that
so.
for them?
I think so. Is that why people? I think that's why.
Okay.
So let's dive into this new 10-part series. So we're basically going to each week is sort of a different aspect of being a technology entrepreneur. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into getting an app actually launched. So ideas are easy, but taking something from start to finish is it proves to be much tougher than people imagine it to be. So I guess this first week we're sort of diving right in with step one, which is basically you have an idea. What next?
Yeah, and
So, and we get a lot of people who have an idea and don't really know what's next.
yeah, and this is subject to change, but I think it would help if we laid out right now, since we do know what all 10
Oh
parts are
yeah,
going to be, subject to change, kind of what we're going to be covering. I think that would be helpful so people can kind of plan their note taking around our episodes.
let me pull up the list.
I have it. I can go through it. So
Go
today
for it.
is so you have an idea, and then next week part 2 will be how to design your idea. Then part 3 will be how to build your idea, how to pay for your idea, how to launch your idea. Then we'll have a sort of a mid part break or a mid series break and talk about common pitfalls with entrepreneurship, how to market your idea, how to update your idea, how to grow your idea, and how to sell or exit from your idea. So we're going to kind of run the gamut from conception to exit and try to do a deep dive on each kind of aspect of entrepreneurship, especially in light of tech entrepreneurship.
And it'll be cool too because you can sort of follow along as we build out this this idea that we had. We're actually going to be building an app as part of this 10-part series. You'll sort of see the idea come into being, and you can sort of follow along with that too. And then at the end, we'll have an ebook accompanying this this whole project, so you'll be able to check that out too. And hopefully, it'll be useful. I mean, it's we've done it so many times at this point that we sort of know what the common pitfalls are, so we can sort of provide a little bit of insight for people who are just getting started with tech entrepreneurship or who have experience and have a brand new idea that they want to try out and they're not really sure exactly what the sort of step by step is to get it from start to finish. So I guess we can dive into the first episode if you want to sort of. I guess we didn't really plan out like the back and forth, but I guess maybe you should take the reins and just imagine that. Well, we'll start with how do folks usually get in touch with us? I mean, I know we've sort of gotten cold calls, we've met people at bars, we've old colleagues have come to us with ideas, so we've sort of run the gamut in terms of how folks sort of approach us. But what's sort of the most common way that you can, I guess, approach a company with an idea that you want to have built out?
Well, for us, it's always been it's been from many different avenues, but the end result has always been the same. I have an idea I want to tell you about. That's always what it comes down to. I have this idea that I want to tell you about. That's
And
the answer.
largely that occurs when when people ask what you do, and you say you own a tech company or you work in tech. The next sentence is almost inevitably,
Do you
"Oh
build
man, I had
apps?
this great idea."
But yeah, or one step removed is, do you build apps?
Yeah,
And
I
it's
don't
like,
even get that anymore.
and I say,
I don't
yes,
even get that nicety.
try my chicken nachos. They are to die for.
And if the conversation
Plot
doesn't
twist,
end
Brady,
there, then you
teach you
know
how to
there's a
cook on this episode.
if the conversation doesn't end there, you know you have a chance of building a relationship with that person because they're going to
That's
put up with your
right.
terrible puns
That's right.
through the lifetime of the of the development cycle. Um, so I guess I imagine that I'm a guy coming up to you and saying, I have this great idea for an app. I guess the next step would be,
Well, tell me what it is.
so the idea for this app is, let me take a step back. So Benjamin Franklin, who is this guy?
The guy or the plumbing company?
Both.
Okay.
Um, but I guess I'm thinking more of the guy
Okay.
from the 18th century. He was not like not a wealthy kid, so he didn't really have much of an education, but he was always sort of jealous of kids who did get that education. He always wanted to figure out a way to uh, become more erudite himself. So he came up with this plan. I think it was in his late teens, early 20s, whereby he would teach himself to write by basically picking apart the writings of, this is probably already a terrible pitch because I've gone on way too long. Is the elevator ride is over,
Yeah.
um,
You're
but
not
basically
supposed
he
to be
would,
flossing your teeth at this point.
yeah, it's bedtime. Um, he would basically improve his writing by studying the works of essayists whose work he enjoyed or he thought was like sort of the pinnacle of good writing. There was a newspaper called The Spectator that was basically like the top political writings of the day. And so what he would do is he would parse out, like he would literally cut paragraphs out of the paper and mix them up and try and reassemble them to learn how to structure an article or an essay. He would convert the article into poetry so that he could learn new words and improve his vocabulary and sentence structure. And then he would like let it stew for a month or two and then try and convert that poetry back into prose and then compare his prose with the original article and sort of compare how he said stuff versus how they said stuff. And sometimes he said he would find that the way he said it was actually like more pleasing. And so he got sort of like a little, boost of confidence from that. So basically my idea for the app is a digital implementation of that idea, and it's called Lingua Franklin. And it's a way to teach yourself how to write by importing writing uh, that you think is sort of writing that you would like to emulate in your own writing, and then going through Benjamin Franklin's process of reordering paragraphs, turning prose into poetry and poetry back into prose.
Okay. All right. So I guess so that, and I'm kind of jumping back and forth in the back and forth, but then like my first question would be, then where are you getting the writing samples from? Is this going to be the user of the app like finds writing that they enjoy and they're going to copy and paste it, or are you going to like import it automatically?
That's exactly, well, so there's two basic ways. So one idea I had would be that companies could approach Lingua Franklin and say, we'd like you to feature our writing for users. And the other way would be users would read an essay or find a passage of a book that they really liked and be able to import it themselves, whether that's sort of like uploading a file or copying and pasting.
Okay, so then when the user, let's just take, let's set aside how they actually get the content that they like in there. So once they get the content that they like in there, the app basically chops it up and just kind of organizes it and organizes the paragraphs in kind of any random order.
Yeah, so I would imagine part of the import process would be sort of picking out the paragraphs or even the sentences in a paragraph. And then presenting the user with the paragraphs in, I guess, yeah, like a jumbled order, or just like I'm not sure how it'd be laid out. Scrambled up maybe, or just presented linearly. And then the user would have to sort of drag and reorder the paragraphs into what they imagine would be the proper order for the piece of writing. And then have like a little comparison between theirs and uh, the actual work.
Okay, so at this point, the end user isn't doing any actual writing; they're just doing reorganizing at this point, right?
That's so step one is reorganizing. Step two would be to present the work itself and then have a way for the user to input poetry, lines of poetry that they convert the prose into poetry, and then eventually the reverse of that. So present the user with the piece of poetry or the poem that they wrote, and then have inputs to convert that poem back into prose, or the original prose to their newly composed prose. And
Okay,
that's sort of the entire process that Benjamin Franklin used.
and I got a bit of a jumbled statement there. So okay, so I got the reorganization part. That's cool. And then what you cut out is I couldn't say couldn't hear if you said after that they are going to rewrite it or they're going to rewrite it from prose into poetry only.
From prose into poetry only. There's no
Okay.
rewrite from prose to prose.
Okay, got it. And so then what is the determining factor or the determining factors to tell if the end user has created better prose from the original prose?
That's entirely individual. There's no sort of metric or anything.
Okay.
There is an idea of, just as a sort of proof of efficacy, having the user at some point, as part of the initial process, actually rewrite the prose as prose, and then compare that initial piece of writing with uh, the poetry to prose that they create like a month or two down the line, and then have users sort of blind choose which one is better, just as like a way to prove that the app actually works. But that's sort of just an idea at this point. I'm not sure we need to build that out.
Gotcha. Okay. So kind of like a non-core feature would be some sort of crowdsourcing rating system of the original proses and the rearranged proses kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah.
Got it. And so then the poetry thing. This is again just for the own user's edification, where they can rewrite the prose as poetry and then just take a step back and say, "I'm happy with this."
Well,
Or
it's really more so the reason he did that, and the reason that works, is that uh, he wanted to expand his vocabulary. And so I guess the challenge would be, finding the right word to use in the line of poetry, and the the fact that that sort of necessitates having enough words at your beck and call to be able to find something that fits within the poem. So that step is more so just to learn new words and learn how to structure the various ways to structure a sentence so that words appear at certain points to fit the meter or the rhyme or whatever the poem needs.
I gotcha. And on that note, it wouldn't be too difficult for the app to do. It wouldn't even really be machine learning, but to count the number of different words the user is using and chart that to see if they're being
Yeah,
successful. Like if their vocabulary is growing, we can show that based on the number of different words they've been using, kind of
that's
thing.
a great idea. Yeah, something I hadn't thought of.
Okay, so yeah, I think I understand the basics of it. So I guess the next question is like, have you done any research to see if anyone else is doing this?
Yeah, so there's a lot of writing apps out there. There's Grammarly, there's Page a Day. There's something called the closest one I could find was something called, I think it's called Air Story. I might have that name wrong, but that's more of a collaborative writing tool where teams can get together if they're writing, proposal or report or something, and they can actually go in and rearrange pieces of writing that they're sort of composing together as a team. There isn't really a direct example of an app that does something similar to this. So a lot of the writing apps are either like, I think it's called Page a Day. It might be 1,000 words a day, but that's a motivational writing app that's basically you need to write this many words a day or you need to write this many pages a day, just to like get people to write and build that habit of writing every day. And then there's apps like Grammarly, or there's one called, I think it's called Hemingway, that sort of analyzes your writing and tries to make your sentences shorter, more succinct, more to the point, more like Ernest Hemingway's writing. But those Grammarly, Hemingway, those are more the syntax of writing, the rules of writing, and sort of a little bit of what they imagine to be sort of objective uh, examples of good writing and trying to get you to write that way. But there isn't one where it's sort of user driven, sort of an individual exercise like Benjamin Franklin's system is, where you're sort of just on your own with your favorite writing and you yourself analyzing your improvement.
Gotcha. And kind of to step out of the normal back and forth,
Yeah, yeah.
can you describe how you went about researching if that idea existed and what the competitors were? Because I think one of the biggest things we always miss is a lot of people come to us with this great idea and it's been done like 100 times over.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. That is one of the that might be like sort of the number one uh, sticking points when people have an idea, is the fact that it's been implemented not even just once, but like multiple times over, and it's sort of a non-starter right out of the gate. Although I will say, even apps that have been done before, a lot of times there has been no adoption of the pre-existing tool. So we've built apps where there's sort of a direct correlate that already exists in the app store, or sort of just out in the wild, but usage is in the hundreds or thousands, and that's after like 5 or 6 years. I guess that would be maybe a red flag for the idea itself, that there might not be the possibility for widespread adoption. That's definitely something to consider as you're sort of researching the various competitors. But what I did is I was aware of some of the writing tools already. I've used Grammarly before. I've used Hemingway before. But I like Google is your friend as far as finding new apps, and the app stores themselves are your friends, because they will recommend apps that are sort of related, and they're really good with their recommendations, because it's basically users who have downloaded this app have also largely downloaded these apps, and you're going to find people who want writing apps are going to download as many writing apps as they can to improve their writing. So you'll sort of find competitors that way. Or if you just go on Google and type, I wouldn't type Hemingway versus as a search, because then you're just going to get flame wars about who's a better writer than Ernest Hemingway. But if you type Grammarly
Like,
versus, or page a day versus, then you'll get uh, there's sites that will go through competitors. There's blog posts that'll go through writing apps, and then even just searching, doing keyword searches. So writing apps, or apps to improve my writing, or I guess in this case it would be like I've even searched for Benjamin Franklin app, or use something similar like that. So it's just a couple hours of research, just trying to suss out exactly what the landscape is. Should give you a good idea of what is out there, and whether there is not just a competitor, but a successful competitor.
yeah, and just to add to that, you kind of touched on the exact direction I go in, but you mentioned the opposite direction. I start very narrow, like uh, app that rearranges words to teach better grammar,
Mhm.
and then I slowly back it out from there, like apps that teach better writing, and I get or writing apps, and I keep getting more and more generic
Yeah,
to find all of them. And then once you have specific names of apps like Grammarly, you can type in apps like Grammarly,
right.
and you can get a list of competitors. And to your point, just because there's a competitor out there doesn't mean it's a non-starter, but you have to consider things like if it's widely successful, you're going to be fighting a network effect. If it's not widely successful, you need to see why it wasn't widely successful, and maybe it had nothing to do with the idea, but the execution of the idea. And then also, if you still decide you want to go forward with it with a crowded market, that's okay, but you're going to probably have to raise a lot more money when it comes to financing time or funding time to be able to outspend those competitors in the marketing realm.
I'd also add too, you should think about what your differentiators would be if there is a widely adopted sort of success story out there. I'm thinking, you know, Facebook launched when MySpace was already around, but Facebook's differentiator was we're limited to college campuses, and that was their sort of pitch for the first couple of years, and that's how they sort of built a large enough audience that when they sort of flipped the switch and opened it up to the world at large, they had basically buried MySpace and all of its competitors.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. So I guess the next question that we kind of move back into our back and forth with. Okay, so I understand the idea. It's awesome that you did some research. I'll probably do some research too, just to see if I can find anything. The next question is, because it's not immediately apparent to me, how at some point you're gonna have to make money from this. You're gonna have to monetize it, as we say in the business. So have you thought about that, and what are your plans there?
Yeah, so there's sort of two angles that you can monetize this from that I thought of. One of them we sort of touched on, which is newspapers, magazines, eh, I guess individuals uh, might pay to feature their writing as examples that users might use to train on. So I would imagine maybe the New York Times or the Washington Post would say, we would like you to feature some of our essays, or Harper's might say, they would sponsor an essay to appear in Lingua Franklin that users could opt to import into their account and use as the basis for their training. I think the other angle that might be worthwhile is the education angle, where you could actually reach out to schools and have them integrate lingua franklin with their writing courses. So a professor might be able to go in and maybe a creative writing course, maybe a business writing course, there might be, or even a legal writing course, there might be good examples of writing that you would like to see your students structure their writing like. So you could reach out to Harvard Business School and they might say, if we want our students to be able to log into sort of a Harvard Business School portal on Lingua Franklin and have these examples of business writing and then use them as training tools to improve their own business writing. So those are sort of the two angles that I think could be monetizable with Lingua Franklin.
And so on those notes, talking about the newspaper industry and the education industry, do you have existing contacts in those industries, or is this something you're going to have to kind of biz dev from ground up?
Yeah, I think that would be part of the biz dev process, would be sort of reaching out to those entities and sort of building the relationships. I have, a handful of contacts, but not enough with clout to sort of get Lingua Franklin pushed through on any sort of scale.
And just to jump out of the interview, the reason that's a good question to ask is because that will help us consult the client on how much money they're going to have to raise. If say for example they are a former professor from Harvard University,
Yeah.
they're not going to have to raise a lot of money for biz dev to get those connections inside Harvard to get an agreement signed. Where if they're going to biz dev this from scratch, they're going to need to raise money, probably hire someone to raise biz dev or to run biz dev rather. So we just trying to get an idea. And again, that's not money that will go to us, but we're trying to consult them on how much money they're actually going to have to raise for this app idea.
Yeah, and I would say too that it's not sort of a mitigating factor. We've seen success. Obviously, there's less of a barrier to entry if you sort of have an existing in with whatever entity you're trying to sell your product to. But we've worked with tons of clients who have done sort of bootstrapped biz dev who have seen their apps completely blow up. So it's not, it's definitely tougher, but it's not going to be sort of uh, uh, not a limiting, an eliminating factor. So like your app can be successful if you don't know anyone in academia or journalism
Yeah, I think
with Lingua Franklin.
RadPad, which we talked about, was a good
Exactly. Yeah.
example of
Yeah.
Jonathan
Exactly.
Evers was again, he wasn't. This is the thing. He was smart. He let us do the technical lifting, and he was just out every day pounding the pavement, building those networks, finding those connections. And he had no previous experience in real estate or previous connections there. So it's definitely doable. It's just something that you need to take into account.
And I guess sort of one thing to add too is just when you're sort of researching a firm to work with on your idea, it's probably a good idea to sort of look for someone who's worked with sort of a various number of industries. So, you know, you almost want a pseudo consulting firm, like a technical consulting firm who's going to be able to sort of research your idea, understand the viability of your idea, and sort of build it out the best way that that it can be built. So you don't want somebody who's sort of nitty gritty on any given industry, unless it happens to be the industry that you're building the app in. You want somebody who can sort of who has proven success in a wide range of industries because they'll sort of be able to help you with basically every aspect of your app through the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, jumping back in. So we've talked about newspapers, we've talked about education industry, but really what we're looking at here, the if we're going to describe the profile of the end user, we're talking about people who, I don't think there's an age restriction here. I think we're just talking about people who want to improve their writing. Is that kind of how you would describe the overall demographics?
100%. Yeah, it's completely wide open. I think the focus is probably going to be more so on students and younger learners, but it would obviously be open to anyone who wants to improve the writing.
Okay, cool. So I think that's important because we could go the niche route with marketing and target students who want to improve their writing, or we can kind of go the more global route and just target people who want to improve their writing.
Yeah.
Um, offhand, the magnitude of the problem. Obviously, I'm on emails all day long. I know that bad writing is a problem, but have you done any research to either figure out how widespread the problem is, or what the market is for people who are the market size rather is for people looking to improve their writing?
Yeah, so I've done a bunch of research. It's more on the academic side because that's where a lot of the studies are. So uh, I have hard numbers, and I'm sort of going off the top of my head here, but it's something like 75% of professors say their students have never written a paper longer than 5 pages. I think, and I think there was something like before students turn in an assignment, like 95% of them say that the number one thing they want to hear is feedback on their writing. And then after they turn in their assignment, I think only 5% say that they want feedback on their writing, that like 95% just want to hear what grade they got. So I think there is definitely a desire to improve one's writing. And there's also a huge need to improve writing because there's been various studies both on sort of, I guess, linguistic complexity and sort of just objective measures, like sort of objective. It's all subjective, but they've done studies where people have read writing from different periods of time, different students' writings from different eras, and there has been a marked decline in the quality of writing over the past couple decades. So there definitely is a problem here that I don't want to say needs to be solved, but I think it would sort of be in the best interest uh, of culture and society if people could write better and express themselves better. And I think people want to be able to write better and to express themselves better too.
Well, I remember back when I was before I would hurt my back by bending over the sink when I was in my getting my MBA. There was a business writing class, and there were some stunning statistics about business writing and how little of experience people in business had composing even simple emails correctly. So I definitely know there's a market out there.
Yeah, there definitely is a problem, and I mean, I think you can just sort of see it day to day. There's obviously a lot of anecdotal experience with just the quality of writing appearing to be worse. But I think beyond that, people do. I think that the most that study where the students want feedback on their writing to me is the most impressive because there really is a demand among kids to be able to write better until they turn their assignment in, and then all they care about is the grade. Which I think the the way that Lingua Franklin solves that is that it is a process of improvement. So there isn't sort of the grade focus in the app itself. It's really you're writing frequently, and you're sort of trying to objectively measure how your writing is improving over the months that you use it, if that makes sense.
Sure. And also now we need one of those directors things so I can be like cut and then we can go explain the
And then
interview.
we can
So
jump back out.
yeah, so
We should take our hats off.
so the niche approach is one that you can certainly take with your idea, and sometimes it's tough for the entrepreneur to limit themselves out the gate. But it's sometimes the smarter play in the long run, because if you can capture a niche and then expand it from there, oftentimes that's the quickest way to growth. Sometimes it's not, sometimes it is. But if there are niches you can pursue, you want to know what those niches are and see if that is an area for a growth pattern where you can just dominate one niche and kind of expand it into other more global niches.
Yeah, and I mean, there is like, I guess it's kind of jumping back in, but with this app, there kind of is that niche that needs to be filled of uh, education writing, or writing in an educational setting, some sort of app for that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know we're running against the time, but there was one more question that I had from the standard interview, so I'll say action and we can
I think
start again.
it's probably not a bad idea to go a little bit over, because this is like, uh, I mean, this is a fraction of the time that we spend anyway with entrepreneurs who come
Right,
to us with
right,
ideas.
right.
So it's probably good to sort of cover all the necessary bases, even in sort of a limited scope.
Yeah, well, I think really, I mean, from a high level overview, because we're kind of jumping out and answering the questions that we would delve into a little bit. But I
Yeah.
think the last question I would have is, when we're meeting with someone, is are you are you going to be moonlighting on this, or are you going to be focusing on this full time?
Yeah. And I guess this is kind of like this is a faux answer,
Right,
because
right, right,
obviously
right.
we'll be the ones working on it. But I would imagine if somebody had this idea, this strikes me as a moonlighting idea. This strikes me as sort of a harebrained idea that like a college professor would have, where he would want to build it, you know, off time from teaching courses. Don't you think this is kind of thing like a writing professor would cook up, or even like a history professor who maybe is
I,
like a Franklin scholar?
I think so. I think you're right. I think it would definitely start as a moonlighting idea, and from our perspective, we prefer to hear I'm going to be working on this full time. We
Yeah,
prefer
yeah,
to
yeah.
hear that. However, so if the answer is I'm going to be moonlighting on this, my next question is basically, okay, so what is your kind of idea in your head when you stop moonlighting on this? At what point does this become your full-time focus? Because if it's going to be successful, it's going to have to be at some point. So at what point will you know, hey, I need to focus on this full time?
Yeah, and I think that the advice that we give there too, this is sort of a non-answer. I'm sort of out of character here, but the advice is sort of to set a metric or some sort of scale that once it reaches that point, you've basically told yourself that's big enough that it needs to sort of be, I need to sort of take over at that point. And so I guess if I'm jumping back into my lingua franklin hat, it would be, I'm trying to think if I'm sort of like thinking as an entrepreneur who came in. It would basically be like if I could get a school signed on to use it in a course, I think that would be success beyond my wildest dreams for this application.
Yeah, that's great. And usually the answer when the answer is moonlighting is when I get to an A round of funding, which we can talk about that more. I will have a dedicated episode for it, but that's generally the answer is once I have funding for this idea, then I'll quit my day job
Yeah, I guess
and
once the
focus
money is
on that.
real, that makes everything real.
Yep. Yep. Well, from my standard interview, that's kind of the full questions that I have. I don't know if you want to throw anything in there, but that would kind of give me the whole perspective of getting started and writing up a proposal and having some tips for and advice
Yeah, I
for
was
the
gonna say sort of
entrepreneur.
like just walk folks through the next steps, and I guess what the next episode is gonna entail, because I think that's the how to design your idea episode.
Yeah, so I think the design aspect, again, especially when we're involved, it includes writing out a project proposal, kind of a detailed what technologies we're going to use, how we're going to approach it, how quickly, roughly we think we can build this out. That's kind of the design aspect of it. And so that generally I say, thank you. I have enough information. I'm going to go do an outline and I'm going to present this outline to you via email. And I want you to let me know how close I am to capturing your vision. That's usually the next step from that meeting.
And that'll basically be the next episode in this 10-part series. We'll sort of walk through that, I guess, in sort of a realistic fashion, because we are actually going to be building this idea out just for fun.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
So we'll hit it next week. That'll do it for this week's episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. Make sure to check out the blog post episode at gunnertech.com. The podcast will be up on iTunes. You can check out our ebooks on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iBooks, Kobo, and anywhere else ebooks are sold. Hop on our Facebook page for the Country Store giveaway. Country Store is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. Visit them at countrystoreoutfitters.com. And while you're on our Facebook page, go ahead and answer our question of the week, which this week, Cody, remind them what that is. Actually, I remember what it is, but it's awesome.
What's your app idea?
What is your app idea? Let us know. Get in touch with us if this episode is valuable to you and you have an idea that you'd like to build out. We're definitely all ears all the time. So definitely don't hesitate to get in touch with us. That's going to do it for this week's episode. We'll catch you next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. I'm Derry. That's Cody. We'll see you next week.